So what's up guys, Charles from 3Thanks Dev, and today is a pretty interesting comparison between two APS-C sensor cameras that I just bought over the last 6 months, and we also have a guest judge on the show, my cousin Mitch.
Hello.
The reason why I think he's pretty qualified to make a good judgment on whether or not the budget entry-level Canon 200D is actually a more worth it buy than buying the Sony A6500. So Mitch, background, previously he was a trainer. What were you training actually?
I was training videography to students, so most of my work were done with students who really didn't know how to film, didn't know how to use the cameras and all this. So I did more entry level type of
Beginner
stuff. Yeah, but I did do filming for corporate videos and competition videos and something more professional stuff.
That's cool. So yeah, that's why I said that he's pretty much more than qualified than me. Basically my style of shooting would be more YouTube, more travel vlogging style. So for his kind of filming is really, you need to take things a lot into detail, such as lighting, audio, and all kinds of stuff. For me, travel vlogs, normally I just point and shoot. I don't need to worry about audio because if I'm doing vlogging, it's normally an arm's length away. So Canon 200D comparison against the A6500 is whether or not you should save the money for something that cheap. A Canon 200D with the kit lens costs half as cheap as the Sony A6500. So you're going to be saving at least maybe $700 to $800 US. Okay, so that's just with the kit lens. But for today's review, I did buy two additional Sigma lenses. Sigma 17 to 50mm f2.8 lens for the Canon 200D, and I also got the prime lens, a 16mm Sigma f1.4 lens for the Sony A6500. Some of the basic specs, maybe I'll just let Mitchell know. Both cameras, we don't really do much photography, but just the basic specs. So both cameras have a 24.2 megapixel max resolution. And for video, which we normally shoot video, the Canon 200D, which is basically the cheaper and of course the more entry-level camera, only shoots a maximum of 1080p at 60 frames per second. So the A6500 can go all the way up to 4K 30 frames per second. But
there's no 4K for the Canon?
No, there's no 4K for the Canon. So basically, to make things fair, we're going to shoot both cameras at 1080p 60 frames per second. The other significant difference between the two, the Canon 200D doesn't have any in-body image stabilization. It has some kind of mediocre electronic image stabilization, and the kit lens doesn't have stabilization. For the Sony, it has 5-axis in-body stabilization, plus the kit lens has optical stabilization.
Does the stabilization work on 4K as well as the one? Oh, it works on
So yeah, a lot of the reason why I think he mentioned that, because a lot of cameras like for example my EM1 at 4K, they don't have stabilization, neither electronic, so you just have to use the lens stabilization if it does work. So right now we're going to do some filming. First up, we're going to let Mitchell get a hands-on between the two cameras. So we're going to run through things like handling and the colors. We're going to shoot in automatic and also in flat colors, whereby we do some color grading and stuff. So I think Canon more or less has better color science than the Sonys. Sonys are known to have better and faster autofocus, so it'll be a pretty interesting competition. So let's go.
Let's go.
So right now we are at the park and Mitchell is having his first hands-on on the Canon 200D with the 18 to 55 millimeters f3.5 to 5.6. So as I was mentioning, Mitch, this Canon 200D doesn't have in-body image stabilization, and the lens that you're using doesn't have any optical lens stabilization as well. One thing you can see that Mitch is using this Canon 200D, it actually has an articulating screen, which is pretty cool. Even if you're doing vlogs, you can face the camera towards yourself and you can see yourself in frame. Sony A6500 that I'm using right now, later on you'll see, it doesn't have a screen like that. The screen just flips upwards towards you. So for vloggers, who are considering using the A6500, you either gotta go film GoPro style or you gotta get an external lens. So this is the surrounding area. Dawson, come here. Are you filming?
Yep.
Come here. Come to Papa. Not too close, okay? But you fall into the pond.
Where Papa? Where Papa?
Okay, so right now Mitch is still testing out the Canon 200D just to get a hands-on feel of the camera. Another important thing is shooting in this kind of daylight, Mitch.
Yeah.
Is the screen visible when you're looking at it?
Yeah,
looking at it?
it's relatively good actually.
The contrast is good as well.
It's good, yeah. It's even better than your GoPro screens.
Okay, that's good because for my A6500, I think later on you'll see that it's
quite good.
it's really hard to see in this kind of brightness. Can you see the screen?
Actually, yeah, it's quite. I mean, okay, my handphone is definitely better because of the screen protector.
Okay. So Mitch has just finished doing some filming on the Canon 200D with the kit lens. Total cost is about 450 to 500 US. So for a $500 camera, how do you think the performance was? Is it pretty decent kind of camera?
It's quite good.
What were the key strong factors of
The strong factors.
autofocusing?
Autofocusing is not as I mean, it's good, but it's because it's a bit loud. And
Oh yeah.
and it's not as quick as
Sony's.
The Sony, probably other cameras that I've used also lah.
Okay,
So
sure.
it's not as quick. And then positioning of the buttons, as you can get it from a Canon, is actually good lah.
Okay.
Because I like the way you can just switch to video mode, and then you can just tune auto to everything. The focus buttons here, the zooming. As I said previously, there was some issue when I zoomed, right? I couldn't capture the background,
Okay.
so I had to manually zoom it, and then when I go back to auto zoom, it managed to capture again.
Okay. So
Sorry, a bit tired.
you get it laggy. I just ran after my son doing some filming.
Yeah.
But right now, Mitch is gonna swap over to this camera that I'm using on right now. Still on the kit lens, but the kit lens for the Sony does have lens stabilization, and the camera itself, the body has 5-axis in-body stabilization. So we're gonna let him try out this camera in automatic mode. Then later on, we'll swap over to my other lenses, the more expensive lenses than these two kit lenses that I'm using. So yep, Mitch, you ready to
Yeah, let's try that.
try on the Sony A6500?
Yep. Dawson, come, catch me, come.
Okay, so while Mitch is trying out the A6500, what I've done is I'm using the Canon 200D, but I've swapped on the new lens which I just bought, which is the Sigma 17 to 50mm f2.8. So it's a constant aperture of f2.8, so that's pretty cool. So this lens is actually pretty cheap as well. So if you are considering any Canon cameras, a zoom lens like this costing about $350 US is pretty cheap, and it has optical stabilizing lens, so that's pretty cool as well. So right now I'm gonna do vlogging style because, like I said, I am going to Europe and I am gonna do my usual travel vlogs. So I'm just trying to get a good feel of which camera would be better. My last European trip or traveling vlog that I did was on the Panasonic G9, and you all know how good that is for a video camera. So right now I'm just deciding between the A6500 and also with the Canon 200D, which one would I bring along for my European trip. So coming back to Mitch. So how's everything, Mitch?
Okay, not too bad. The lighting is slightly darker when the sun is behind you.
Okay.
And even though when I focus on your face, right, the lighting doesn't change much. So it doesn't have that. You need to do a manual settings and increase the iris to capture your
So the automatic settings really not doing any.
Yeah,
okay.
Slightly not as good as the Canon camera.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So when you're doing probably vlogs and all that, you really need to adjust yourself
to face against the sun, that kind of thing. Okay, and one big issue is, like you were mentioning, is it doesn't have an articulating screen. So
yes.
Definitely the screen-wise, Canon already wins in this portion.
Yeah. And the screen is really dark. I can't really see much. I'm just basically looking at the sky now. Yes.
Okay.
So the screen, it's for the picture here. It has a more cinematic feel when I'm filming.
Okay.
The colors are more bleached as compared to the Canon. Is slightly more dynamic.
Okay. Are you shooting in automatic?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Automatic.
Great.
Okay. So the colors here is not as dynamic as the Canon one, but we only can tell if we go to the laptop or the computer.
Yeah, I get that too. The color science on the Canon is actually better than the A6500. That's what I noticed as well when shooting in automatic speed. But of course, because the Sony A6500 is a higher end camera, you do have the options to shoot in different like S logs and cine logs and all the different picture profiles, which is great for basically color grading, because you do have the option for all the different picture profiles. So you can shoot flat, you can shoot whatever, cine, gamut, pro, different picture profiles. But for the Canon 200D you have none of it. So for my manual settings, I actually just decrease the shadows, the saturation and all kinds of stuff to make the colors flat. Later on we'll do a color grading when we are shooting in manual mode.
Also, one thing to mention, for when you press the record button over here, this small tiny little record button over here, the small red color word comes out, record. So on a bright and sunny day, at one point of time when I was looking, I didn't know whether it was recording or not.
Because the screen is so dark, is it?
The screen is so dark and the words are too small. For the Canon, I noticed that there was a real big red light down there, which all cameras should have. You know, the red light when you film.
Yeah.
So for like same as GoPros and all this, when you do vlogs and all this, you look out for the red light, right? If not,
especially when you can't see yourself.
Especially when you can't see yourself. And when you turn the camera, I don't think there's a way to tell whether it's recording or not, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you might miss out some of those opportunities with the Sony.
That's true.
In terms of feel, I don't know why I like carrying
The weight of it, is it?
The weight of it,
Okay.
and the compactness of a Sony camera.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good in your hands. I mean, all your buttons, all the, you know.
Yeah, because it's smaller size. Just to point out another basic thing is that between the two cameras, the A6500 is weather sealed. So if you're shooting in the rain or snow, that will give you a lot of protection. The Canon 200D doesn't have any of those, so probably will short circuit. Nah, okay, let's not try the water test.
The water test.
Right now, shooting on the Sigma. Come run towards Papa. Run towards me. Run. Run. Oops, my slippers came out. Oh no. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the shade, little bugger. Where's my bag? Alright, so right now we've swapped over this lens and I'm also shooting in picture profile. Mitch is using the new Sigma lens. It has optical image stabilization. And you can also see that I am using the Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens. So we are both using Sigma lenses right now. The difference is that that has optical stabilizing lens, and the one that I'm using on my Sony right now doesn't have any lens stabilization. So that's the difference. I believe the OS Sigma lens on the Canon will make a lot of difference because... Are you okay, Dawson? Huh? I gotta leave. Vlogging style as well is a lot lighter using this Sony, although the body is heavier. The lens is a lot lighter than the Sigma zoom lens on the Canon 200D that Mitch is using. It actually feels lighter on the hand, on the arm, so it'll be less tiring to walk around using the Sony A6500 rather than that big lens on the Canon 200D. So Mitch is behind me. Beautiful sky. The Mitch is running handheld, as you can see. So how much will the lens stabilization actually work?
Actually, it feels really quite stable when you run.
Okay, so right now you're going to test out the A6500. Okay, this lens, this Sigma lens that you're going to use does not have any lens stabilization.
Okay.
So,
the
but
camera itself has.
the camera has. Okay. Come on, let's go, Dawson. Let's get some ice cream. Okay, so basically that was it. Pretty good test on both cameras. So basically the purpose is to see whether or not Mitch thinks that the Canon 200D with the kit lens, or maybe even with, if you have the extra money to buy the additional Sigma lens that I got, is only about 350 US, but it's still cheaper than the Sigma 16mm on the Sony, which costs about 450 US. So what do you think? Is the Canon 200D, which is half the price of the A6500. Is it good enough to compete against the A6500?
Actually, yes, I feel it's good enough to compete if you're just doing if you're doing amateur filming and just going around doing vlogging and taking nice videos. The picture quality based on the LCD that I've seen, it's actually quite good. It's quite dynamic, the pictures. For 1080
60 FPS.
and 60 FPS is actually quite good. It's quite worth the money.
You haven't seen the
I have not seen
the actual footage yet, but
Yeah.
you will get to see it soon. But basically, just off shooting, like the handling, the autofocus, the colors. I mean, if you don't do your own color grading, the colors, you think that the Canon 200D is good enough?
Yes, the handling wise, not much difference from the Sony. I just like the Sony because it's compact, but the Sony tends to heat up. So if you're doing long days on super hot weather in countries that are really hot,
Like our country.
and our country especially, yeah, the camera tends to get a bit too hot, the Sony one. And if you have to hang it around your neck, you'll be burning your stomach. Yeah,
Burning your stomach.
So LCD screen,
That's definitely a plus point,
It's
I think.
really a plus point. If you're doing vlogging, you can turn the screen all the way to the front and you can see yourself. That's very, very important. If you're shooting in really bright sunlight behind you or even just above you, right? Yeah, you can really see from the LCD screen. But they're actually screen protectors anti-glare screen protectors for Sony cameras. So
I'm actually using that.
autofocus for the I'm back to autofocus again. I'm very particular about focusing.
Okay, autofocus.
Yeah. So the autofocus for the Canon 200D was actually quite noisy, as I said.
Yes,
Yeah. So if you're
extremely
doing
noisy.
Yeah. So if you're doing more on videography, taking photos of scenery and everything, and then you're just like talking behind, right? You might hear some sound like the movement of the.
It's pretty loud. One thing to take note: the autofocusing is very, very
distracting.
distracting. Yeah.
I can hear it when I'm filming it. So not too sure how it will sound like when you transport it over the
Yeah, it is quite noisy.
Yeah.
Basically, my style of filming, whereby we don't really need audio, basically just background music, whereby I slow things down, make it cinematic.
Then you'll be perfect.
Then you'll be perfect. You don't. It doesn't matter of the audio. Maybe when you're vlogging, probably when you're showing yourself, then that noise will come in. But if you're just shooting like a building or someone walking and stuff, so normally I don't have music. But for his kind of filming, everything is important.
Yeah.
Everything is important. So the lighting, the autofocus, the
sound.
audio as well.
Unless because we do separate sound for during the record. So if you're just recording via the camera, sometimes we go on trips, we do budget corporate videos, and we just do everything off camera. We don't have recording equipment and all that, so that is quite important. But I might say that it will not affect much if you're just doing vlogs on YouTube and all this. What I like about the Canon 200D was the buttons were all very well positioned to your fingers and hands and everything. I didn't have to look much when I was using the Canon. I basically knew where the buttons were, and that was my first time holding a Canon 200D. But for the Sony, I had to look. Even for the record button for the Sony camera, I had to find the record button.
Because it's a small on the right hand side.
So when you switch to for Canon 200D, when you switch to the video mode, okay, everything is just all video, and you just know where to turn, where to get the correct aperture settings. And I did a bit of manual, and I roughly could see. I knew where the aperture settings were, So
I think the touchscreen on the LCD was actually much more responsive as well.
Yeah, it's actually the touchscreen was more responsive on the autofocus than the autofocus itself.
Okay.
Yeah, so if there's a problem for you, if you cannot get it basically works from the autofocus, correct? So you just have to touch on the point that you want, and you will just autofocus to that point. So that's actually a plus. There's no touchscreen on the Sony, right?
There is actually, but not really very responsive. And I think some parts some parts you can use the LCD, some you have to use the dial to navigate. One thing I didn't mention to Mitch is that for the A6500, there's about 100 over autofocus points.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is a plus point. For the Canon 200D, there's only 11 autofocus points.
Oh, so that's why I was saying just now in the car that I couldn't get the focus from the sceneries, right? They were trying to focus on the trees, on the grass, on the points, and
so he even found that out even before. I didn't have to tell him.
I didn't know about that points. Like I'm not really sure the specs of it, but overall, if you're asking me to take that out to go overseas and film, I would. Because it's
over the A65. Let's say you had both. Would you bring that instead of the A65, or would you?
When we tried it with the Sigma lens, I think I would have brought the 200D.
The 200D?
With the Sigma lens, because the motion, the Sigma lens alone is well known.
Optical stabilized,
yeah. It was very good. So I would have chosen that. over just the basic Sony camera without any additions to it. No anti-glare, my particular anti-glare screen, no light protector, no ND filter. Basically, just if you're just counting the simple Sony camera,
Point and shoot
style with the Canon camera on the Sigma lens, I would have taken the Canon camera.
Okay, so there you have it. So I think the important part would be the Sigma lens. The Sigma, I bought this 17 to 50 mm f2.8, so it's a constant aperture. Like I said, it's about 350 bucks. So it is a pretty good investment.
So what is the price for the Sigma plus the Canon versus
the Sigma? The lens is about 350. The body was about 400. So that's 750 US. And for the A6500, the body alone was about 1,200 US, and the lens was about 450 US.
Oh.
Yep. So like I said, it's
you
whether or not if it's the kit lens or with the Sigma lenses, it's double the price of the A6500.
Actually, it's a good takeaway because for those of you looking for a budget, something on a budget, you can mix and match. Instead of rather getting a stock camera with worth 1,000 plus, you can mix a simple camera, a good simple camera from the Canon 200D, and get a slightly better lens, and it works just as well. As
maybe you can skip the kit lens altogether and just go for the 17 to 50, because the kit lens is 18 to 55 millimeter, but it's f3.5 to 5.6, and it has no lens stabilization. So so basically you heard it. I think the Canon 200D did do a pretty good job against the A6500. So like I said, for my Europe trip coming up, I will be bringing the Canon 200D over the A6500. So thanks, Mitch.
Thank you
for coming down, and see you in the next video.
See you.
Bye bye.